A disclaimer for episode 133 of the Love in Lebanon podcast if you've got young ones in the car or within earshot. Back in July, the Lebanon Police Department hosted 3 different showings of the movie Sound of Freedom at the Lebanon 7 Theater. Each showing was well attended, and it sparked a lot of positive conversation surrounding child exploitation prevention. Discretion is advised in this episode as Amy Dickerson and Justin Fuston from the Lebanon Police Department, along with LPD Chaplain Ryan Vinson and Kassie Frazier from Sylvia's Child Advocacy Center, provide insight on how the movie nights came to be, why they're so important, and how we can continue to protect our kids. Hey everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Love in Lebanon podcast. I am City of Lebanon Community Development Director Joe LePage, talking about something serious / important / vital to our community on this episode of the podcast. We're talking about the Sound of Freedom movie that was shown in Lebanon thanks to a group of many great entities and folks, and several of them are in this room with me at this moment. We've got Kassie Frazier with Sylvia CAC, we've got Amy Dickerson and Justin Fuston with our Lebanon Police Department, and we've got Ryan Vinson. He's the lead pastor over at Freedom Church, but also the chaplain for LPD. Guys, thanks for being here on the podcast. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
And if you can, the Sound of Freedom movie really captivated our community for three nights, where it was a free situation, and it continues to have steam throughout not only the country or the continent, but also the world as well. If you can kind of take us behind the scenes of how this whole thing got started with LPD and its chaplain, Ryan, and how it led to it being shown at Lebanon 7.
Yeah, we had a conversation in our chaplain meeting that we gather together every Thursday. And this topic, specifically the movie, got brought up. I had seen kind of previews of the movie or posters of it floating around, but didn't really know much about it. Chief Morgan was talking about it, really passionate about the topic. And so we had a long conversation about it and decided, well, maybe this is a great opportunity to bring awareness to a really important issue. And so we went and saw the movie to see if it was something worth inviting the community to be a part of. And it was kind of a unanimous decision, like, yeah, I think we could do this and rent out some theater space and provide an opportunity for people to come and see this movie to gain awareness of this issue.
What was it about that movie, Amy, Justin, Ryan, that really captivated things and led to that action of, man, we want to take out the roadblocks for people to be able to see this movie and do it for free?
I think for me personally, prior to my position now, I was a detective and I worked a lot of these cases. And in the beginning of the movie, it was very accurate to how each case worked. And so it was just really realistic to me, if that makes sense. And I'm like, people need to know really what's going on.
And how did this organically happen where you guys decided that maybe we should investigate how to maybe show this for free, or maybe the public would get on board and do this? What kind of conversation maybe led to that thing happening?
We spoke with the movie theater to see if there was something we could work out where we could rent a theater. They were great. They worked with us. They set aside, the nights and stuff. We spoke with Mayor Gentry, and he was on board with us, okay with us going ahead and doing this. So we all just kind of got together and
in talking with Chief Chad Morgan of LPD, 1,400 or so people took in the movie free of charge over those 3 nights. Is that what you expected? Could you forecast? Were you pleasantly surprised with the number of folks that came out?
We were surprised. Of course, we weren't sure if anybody was going to come. And then we were kind of hoping that we would at least fill one theater of 300 people. But we had a second theater on standby just in case. The first night we did go into the second theater. Then by the third night, we had 3 theaters full. So, just more people came. And they were very appreciative of us showing that because it hit a lot of people.
And don't want to keep on pounding you, Amy, with questions, but so the guys feel free to jump in. Mm-hmm. But reactions, conversations that you guys had at Lebanon 7 with people that had not only appreciative of a free flick, but being able to coming out as well, and how it affected them. Did you guys have some conversations that were good and meaningful?
Yeah, Joe. It appeared everybody was pretty grateful for the opportunity to be able to come and see the movie free of charge. And I do think, again, going off of what Amy was saying, we had no idea what we were going to expect. We didn't know if 20 people were going to come, 1,000 people were going to come. We really had no clue. But people just started showing up, and it became more and more each night. I'm not 100% convinced that if we did 5 nights, the last 2 nights wouldn't have been even more. And we started to see people come from even outside of our community, and those conversations were had out in the hall or out in the lobby, where people were just telling us how grateful they were for this opportunity. And again, it allowed us to spread this message at a greater scale.
And what is it about this movie, though, that led to a lot of those things happening? Was it, Amy, you mentioned the relevancy early on, where when you were investigating a lot of those things were, yep, I do that type of thing. What was it about this movie that continues to be so popular? It's at roughly 155 million so far, and folks heading out to the box office to see it. Is it that special that it really kind of resonates with people, and is that important worldwide to be seen?
I think it resonates with people in a not necessarily just a good way. Okay, so our communities and people around this country don't necessarily know what's going on, and we, as law enforcement, as CAC members, we see this stuff every day. And a movie that's come out that kind of even touches on a small percentage of what we actually see every day, it really allows us the opportunity for this to be a stepping stool for more conversation.
And is that happening? There have been a couple meetings since then, Ryan, with LPD. Is that still something maybe that comes up in conversation? Is it still pretty relevant, that whole kind of reaction, the ripple effect, if you will, from seeing the movie, having the public see it, having them be moved by it, and then kind of seeing some similar things within the community?
Yeah, I think so. I think that it's hard to call it a good movie. It's not a good movie.
Yeah.
It's hard to eat popcorn and watch this type of movie.
Sure.
It was very difficult for me to watch. And again, you three live in this world, and so it probably impacted you in one way. Somebody who's not around this very often, it's a very troubling movie, and it has definitely continued conversation. I know several people who they're now asking, like, what's next? Like, what else can we do? And we knew this wasn't a one-stop shop. This, again, awareness is just part of the goal. But I definitely think that it's opened people's eyes in the community to, okay, this is a bigger problem, not just in the world, which I think is good for them to know. It's good for them to know what happens in the world outside of Lebanon, Indiana, but also what's happening right inside of Lebanon, Indiana.
And if we can transition, Kassie, to kind of talk about it. And full disclosure, everyone, this is not the first recording of this podcast. FYI, getting a little lighthearted here for a minute. A little power surge killed the computer. We lost a lot of stuff, and so we're kind of going back through. So appreciate the patience of our guests, and just letting you know. So if you hear a little laughter in the background, that's why this is the second time doing this. This is a very important topic. Not that we're getting into to in any way, shape, or form frighten the public, and don't want to take a victory lap with our police department. Although we are proud of them, we're proud of their chaplain and what the Sylvia CAC does within our community. But just so you know, kind of a little backstory. We like to be transparent, honest with you. Power, things happened, and this is the second time. You're
doing great.
Yeah, and as are you guys. And so I very much appreciate Kassie and Ryan and Amy and Justin here on this episode of the podcast. But Ryan, you transitioned quite well into something we'd love to chat with Kassie about and bring her in here. That this is an issue worth talking about. This is an issue that is so important. As someone that sees this on a daily basis over at Sylvia CAC, Child Advocacy Center, for those of you keeping score at home, this maybe not to this scale that was in the Sound of Freedom movie, but a similar one that's in the same kind of vernacular, right?
Right. One of the things that I would like to touch on is that word trafficking. Yeah, it's a big word, and it is national and international. And I think when we start having a conversation about this movie, it does pull you into, no, that thing might not affect me here, but now that we have access to computers, things across the world can affect us.
Yes.
They truly can.
Yes.
So child exploitation is what we tend to focus more on, not necessarily the trafficking aspect. In Boone County, I can tell you, child exploitation consists of anything that you have a child do in a sexual nature that you're benefiting from. So if that happens, I'm seeing 180 of those a year. They come in through our doors, and we do those interviews, and we try to put the pieces back together after their life has been shattered. So with this movie, I think it got that conversation going. I think it gave a pretty good insight into what, yes, law enforcement does and how they do investigations. We've talked a little bit off of the podcast about, the general public doesn't understand sometimes what we do. And so I think it's an opportunity for us to get out and start talking a little bit more about what we do and then how can we prevent this from happening.
Was it validating for you to see the reaction within the community where it is maybe raising awareness for things that you see and are striving so hard to prevent at CAC?
Yes, because I can tell you that this position and this job in 10 years, it is very difficult to get this conversation started, because if it has not affected you, it's not something you want to sit around and talk about.
Yeah.
No one wants to talk about what could happen or how do I protect my kids from these, because that's not going to happen to my kid. And unfortunately, it does. And we're catching a very small amount. Right now, the national statistics are about 30% of the kids are coming forward and outcrying and saying something sexual has happened to them.
And I was going to piggyback off that, Kassie. I think she made an excellent point. There's a lot of numbers we're putting out there, and those numbers are scary. But the scary number, to me anyways, is the number of unknowns. And our goal as a group, as a community, is to work together to lessen those numbers of unknowns and prevent future ones from happening.
And we were talking, everybody, just so you know, before we got going here, that while the Sound of Freedom, the issues discussed there may not be as relevant here in Boone County / Lebanon. If there's one close call, that's too close for us. And if there's one kiddo that is affected in this way, then it's just not acceptable for us. And so we want to strive to keep that from happening. But the next conversation is what do we do going forward? What is the next thing, as Ryan was kind of touching on, kind of what's the next educational step, and what maybe are there tips that the parents, as we're all parents here sitting in this room, that we can do to be proactive to kind of nip some things in the bud before they get down any sort of road down this way?
Yes, there are lots of things that we can look out for and talk about. We look at it from multiple levels: prevention, intervention, aftercare. But in terms of prevention, let's go that route. Prevention, you got to know these facts. You have to know that 1 in 10 children are sexually abused before their 18th birthday. And that can be by someone that they know. 90% are people they know. They've met them over the internet. They've met them in schools. They've met them just in the community. They are friends. Children sexually exploit each other. So these are all things that people need to be aware of and understand that happen. So then how can you prevent those things from happening? Access to my children. My children, the people that I know have access to my children. But when we think about the internet, and we think about Snapchat and all of the different apps and then the law enforcement are rolling their eyes right now because they understand it's a never ending battle. I can tell you, don't do Snapchat, and tomorrow they'll create a new thing. And the next day they'll create a new thing. So it's more about the conversation with your child. If you're giving your child a piece of equipment that gives them access to an entire world, you need to be standing alongside of them, teaching them how to use that.
But Mom, Dad, give me some privacy. Let me have my own thing. That awkwardness you're saying is well worth it. And not being the cool parent to just turn their kids loose is an okay thing.
I would much rather have the conversation with my children and they be upset that I'm checking a phone or that I'm hovering than for one of my children to come to me and say, I took a picture and now they're saying I want $500 or they're sending it to my school.
And full transparency, everyone, most of you in the room here, you experts, have seen instances like this. And if you can, kind of not mentioning any names, of course, or years or anything along those lines, you've seen behavior change. You've seen, as our first version of the podcast, it was grades that went from great to in the toilet.
Yes.
You've seen those things happen in real time. And
yes, there are multiple ways children deal with this type of trauma. They can go from being a straight A student to failing. They can go from being, the captain of the football team to all of a sudden they're not showering and not showing up for school anymore. We have all different levels, but there's always a change in the behavior. And with that change needs to come the conversation of what's going on, A lot of times kids are scared to say what's going on. So they'll test the waters. And they may say something like, if my friend had a person talking to them on the internet, what would happen? So with that testing the waters, that might be their first initial outcry to you to see, how are you going to react? Are you going to be like, oh no, I'm taking the phones, I'm taking everything, I'm shutting everything down? Or are you going to be the parent that says, tell me what's going on? I'm not mad at you. I'm not upset. I want to protect you. So tell me what's going on.
And how much training from a law enforcement perspective? And Kassie, you mentioned with Amy, again, this is the second iteration of our podcast. You guys mentioned how often you guys go to training and trainings together just to be able to kind of spot those same things, or at least have a heightened awareness of it. How important is it on the law enforcement side of things to be up to speed on all those things to help keep our public safe in that way?
I think, being educated in law enforcement is just as important as being educated as a family member or parent. We obviously don't spend near as much time with a person's children or their family. So once we're involved, typically there's already been some kind of informational leak, we'll say, to where we've been brought into the situation. So really it's education for the parents, I think, is the most important. Having that open line of communication, every once in a while, sit down with your kid and see, ask them simple questions, how they're doing, if there's been anything that's, happened that's bothered them. And those may open those doors. But like Kassie said, you're going to see the changes. More often than not, a kid's going to have some pretty drastic changes in their life. And for us, it may be something that just seems like another day. It kind of blends in with the rest of the days. But I can't stress how important it is to notice those and come forward with those and approach those when they're there.
And what's that like as you're investigating, Amy? You mentioned before becoming our assistant police chief. What is it like to be out investigating and seeing some of those maybe warning signs or those things where your ears perk up quite literally with seeing some of the things that maybe those warning signs that you've gone to the trainings on? Stuff.
Joe, I'll steal that if you don't mind.
Okay.
So from a law enforcement perspective, again, we're not usually seeing these until somebody's come forward with information. So when we're going on the scene of a call, if those signs are there, we'll obviously follow up on them. That's why I think it's so important that family and friends and loved ones, they're looking for those signs. If they see something, they notice something wrong, have that conversation with that person. Or voice those concerns to somebody that may be able to help, whether it be a law enforcement official, a counselor, anybody of that nature.
Ryan, you kind of alluded to it earlier, and this is kind of a group question. We'd like to start with you, Ryan, though. You brought up perfectly what happens next. I mean, you guys had in your normal discussion, were led to action in this way, brought in the community, saw some positivity there. We're doing a podcast here. Again, the focus here is awareness and also heightened alert for our community as well, to be able to have a beneficial life for you and your family going forward. But the next question for everybody really is kind of what happens next. Is it we're now aware, we can go forward and that we're on a positive road that way, or is there something else that I'm missing?
I definitely think continued awareness, but I mean, I know for us as for our church, we're leaning on the experts, and we've got Sylvia's coming in some point. We haven't scheduled it yet, but to actually do some training with our kids team and with leaders in the church. And you had ran through in the first rendition of the podcast. You ran through a checklist of of kids environments in churches, and it's immediately after seeing the movie, I'm like, okay, running through the things that I know that we've been very proactive in as a church, cameras and windows and policies and stuff. But it's just got us looking at all that in a fresh way, just to make sure we're following it, make sure that we have the right policies, but bringing in the experts to educate and to educate parents on what to look for. Prevention, all of that is that's a huge thing on our radar.
And so it's led to a positive change with you and having that ripple effect within the congregation. I'm sure at home as well, and all those things just have a positive impact there. Kassie, if you don't mind sharing that checklist, it was so great that you did. And Kassie brought up an example of a teacher not here in Lebanon, but a case that she was aware of with a teacher, and would love for you to share that again. And then the checklist, just share how real this is and that this situation is, and how it can just a little bit, the door open just a little bit can lead to some things that are extremely, extremely negative.
Right. So what I was talking about earlier was we do training sessions called Stewards of Children, and it is geared just at the general public, learning all the signs and the symptoms, and then minimizing opportunity. And what we've learned from years of training, most of the team has went with us to trainings, we've learned the most from people that did this. And so we watched a training where it was a predator, a convicted predator, that discussed how he was a teacher and he would get fired from schools for inappropriate contact with the children. And then he would go to the next school. In total, I think before he was convicted, it was 15 schools. When he would go for his interviews, he would see what the policies and procedures were in the school, to see if they actually followed those policies and procedures, to see how easy the access would be to the children. Predators have to groom for a while. They have to take a while to get a child to trust them. And then once they trust them, then they start exploiting them. So with that, we need to make sure that we're thinking through all of our policies and procedures from that mindset. I do not want to we talked about earlier going on a witch hunt and trying to find the boogeyman, the man or woman that's doing this. And that's not what we want to do. We want to set up environments where they're not comfortable. I have done this for 10 years. I am very proud. I've always been extremely proud of my team and my community, because I do feel like Lebanon and Boone County in general has set up a community that this is not acceptable here. We're not going to put up with somebody hurting our children. We are going to prosecute them. We are going to arrest them. We are going to put them in jail. Unfortunately, I have worked with other communities that's not the number one priority. And I feel like we are that here. And so I'm so glad that this movie did start that conversation. Ryan is correct. Freedom reached out to us and wanted to do Stewards of Children. Zionsville Community Schools have reached out to us. There's a couple different smaller organizations that have reached out and want to do these programs and have these conversations. Can I tell you, it's a one size fits all. What works for Ryan's church may not work for a church you go to, or may not work for Lebanon schools or Western Boone schools. That's why we need to come in and have that conversation. What can we do to make this environment so safe that someone that would want to hurt our children won't come to it?
Yeah, and backing up just a second, the gentleman that was talking at the training was the actual perpetrator. He was the guy, not some actor, not some anybody. That this was the guy after getting caught, obviously. And
he's in prison in Colorado, and he signed on to do a research project where basically he tells us what we need to watch for.
How eye-opening is hearing these things from Kassie and those trainings as well, to know that this is possibility and that is out there.
I know from law enforcement standpoint, it's a little bit off the question, I think, but we are looking at starting like a community outreach type program, or where people can come in and learn stuff, or we can kind of specifically go into neighborhoods and try to make sure that we're kind of helping those neighborhoods, and so all that stuff's in the works. And this is something that we would like to also have, would be maybe Kassie coming in and teaching parents who maybe just don't know what to look for and what to do. So those will be some classes or meetings or whatever that we, she doesn't know it yet. I'm just now telling her.
Yeah.
But
a little better time than the present.
Right.
We can do it right here.
But we would like to do that because we want people to be aware. And we had several people after the movie asking us, what can I do to help? What can we do to help? And so I think this is something that we can do to help. We can offer this training to people who just don't know where to go get it, or, whatever that is. But that is coming for next year. I don't know that it'll be up and going this year, but
Gotcha.
It is coming, and that's one of the main things we're going to talk about.
And Ryan, you said when we started the podcast here, Take Two, that this is not a good movie. And good, it is an informational movie, but it's not one that you enjoy with popcorn and things. But you guys feel like the end result here, that the conversation, the awareness, all those things were positives to come out of a real life, more or less negative movie that the public had a chance to see?
Yeah, it definitely impacted people. Even even leaving the theater, there's many people in tears, and there was some things that were shared, people talking about it, but there was a lot of people just they couldn't even speak afterwards, because the movie really does kind of take you to the edge, and so yeah, it's difficult, but I think the conversation is there, so it's a good result for sure.
Last question I have, and anything else you want the public to know, anything that we can share as we are safely recording the end of this podcast, anything else you want to leave our public with? Again, the goal of this pod and the whole mission of having a free movie night wasn't anything other than awareness for the public, raising alerts for an extremely important issue within our community. Anything else to leave our public with as we say goodbye?
One of the most important things for everybody to do, and the most important thing to do for our kids, is if a child outcries to us, if a child comes forward and says something is happening to me, believe them and get them to the people that can give them the services they need. So, for example, us or the police department who can protect them. Get them there and support them as much as possible, because it is extremely scary. For as uncomfortable it is for us as adults to talk about. Imagine being a child and having to come to somebody and say someone is sexually assaulting you or someone is sexually exploiting you. It's extremely scary. So all they need is our support, and they need us to believe them and support them throughout the entire process.
Yeah, 'cause it's got to take guts to be able to
Absolutely
put yourself in check and do that.
Appreciate you sharing that. Can you get super practical? What if a child does say something, or an adult suspects something? What's the next step?
The next step is if a child says something, you are legally required in the state of Indiana to call that into the Department of Child Services hotline. That number is 1-800-800-5556. It can be completely anonymous. You do not have to tell them anything about you, but you tell them as much as you know about what the child told you. That will generate a report to our local office. Law enforcement then will get involved, prosecutor will get involved, we will get involved, and we will conduct an interview on that child. But we are legally mandated in the state of Indiana. We're one of only 10 or 15 states in the nation that everybody is a mandated reporter. So if you see something or suspect something, you must say something to protect them.
So it's not, I don't feel comfortable doing that. It is, you're bound to do that.
You're bound to do that. And the reason that we are named Sylvia's Child Advocacy Center is because we are named after Sylvia Likens. And the reason Indiana is a mandated reporter state is because of Sylvia Likens. Her case went through state legislature, and they made it a law that everybody has to protect children.
Guys, thank you so much for being here.
I was just going to say, and to piggyback off of that, Ryan made a good point that awareness doesn't stop here. We're going to continue to bring awareness, continue to educate. We'll have updates on, Amy was talking about some of our future things. We'll have updates on our social media. So make sure you're looking at that. And if there's anything that comes up, reach out to us and we'll try to educate as much as we can. And then if you have any questions, get in contact with us.
Excellent. Guys, thank you so much. Justin, Amy, Ryan, Kassie, appreciate your insights and being willing to record a podcast twice.
Thanks, Joe.
I think the first one might have been better, but
The first one was 100% better. But
so we apologize, people.
Yeah, please keep rubbing that in. It's good. It's good. It's good things.
He's going to
things.
find it in some way.
It'll pop up. Thank you most of all to everyone listening to this podcast. More episodes are coming your way soon. The information that LPD is going to share will be shared throughout our city's social media channels. The phone number that Kassie shared will be in the body of this podcast as well. We'll put links to information to help raise awareness within our community about this issue. We appreciate you listening to this podcast, and more episodes are coming your way soon.